Hello. Welcome to this introduction to Ruth chapter 4. Tony last Monday talked about how the story was left on something of a cliffhanger at the end of chapter 3. The fate of Naomi and Ruth still hanging in the balance. Boaz has acted honourably and generously towards Ruth after she sought him out as the guardian redeemer of her family, seeking his protection. But what will the outcome be? If this was a trailer for the final episode of a TV drama, it would be posing questions like, will Boaz get to marry Ruth? Or will he have to give up his claim to another? And what will happen to the mother-in-law, Naomi? As Naomi herself said at the end of the chapter, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. For most of chapter 4 described what happened on that day. Here is verses 1 to 10. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative, Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." "I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and to all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Now we know from previous readings that Boaz is a man of very noble character and has an excellent reputation within the community. So he's going to play things strictly by the book, in this case, the law of Moses. There is another with a prior claim to this piece of land in question, and he knows that he should not stand in the way should they wish to avail themselves of it. At first, this other relative, we don't know his name, seems eager to take up the offer. But then when Boaz points out that caring for Ruth and Naomi is part of the deal, the relative hesitates. There are implications here about inheritance, especially regarding any male children that Ruth might bear him. It would affect his own family's interests. So he backs down, leaving the way clear for Boaz to not only buy the land, but also to redeem, to care for Naomi and Ruth. The rest of the chapter tells us how Ruth and Boaz are blessed with a son. The use of the Hebrew word for wet nurse in 4:16, translated here as cared for, and the townswomen's announcement that Naomi has a son, these things point to a bigger role for Naomi than merely granny on call. It suggests that Naomi would be acting as this child's primary carer. The other women are joyously celebrating with her, commending Ruth as being better than 7 sons, because this son is treated legally as if he was her late husband Elimelech's own heir, inheriting his property, continuing his name. Naomi's fortunes are fully restored from being quite bitter and helpless, homeless. She has much to look forward to. Her family and this son, Obed, has a significant role to play in God's plans for the world. He will be a grandfather to King David, an ancestor to Saviour Jesus himself. When we consider this book of Ruth as a whole, it's very easy to look through a 21st century lens and maybe be tempted to ridicule a situation where a woman as faithful, as hardworking as Ruth has to make a play for the affections of a man to save herself and her mother-in-law from degradation and poverty. Well, somebody once said the danger of a Bible text taken out of context is that the text can sometimes become a con, used in support of positions, points of view, that it doesn't really support when considered in context. So what we read in Ruth, we have to view in the context of the time that it was written, the audience it was written for, and the overall message it's intended to convey. Judged in the context of its own time, it's quite remarkable that in such a patriarchal society, the spotlight is thrown on 2 women as the heroines, particularly the focus on Ruth being described in the same glowing terms as Boaz. Within the confines of that time, Ruth was something of a pioneer, taking the initiative, being willing to take risks to safeguard another, and is portrayed as much an example of loyalty, faithfulness, and integrity as her male counterpart, Boaz. We might ask, what are the simple overall themes we can most relate to in this story that are actually timeless truths for any era? What is it about the way Boaz behaves in this situation which makes us think that he deserved his good reputation within that community? What part did the wider community have to play in making it possible for the situation to be resolved in the best way for all concerned? And what does it mean to be in a situation like Naomi was, holding the newborn baby, filled with amazement about what God had brought about, as if the words spoken by the prophet Jeremiah had come true for her personally? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. What word does God know we most need to hear today in our own situation to give us hope and a future. If you can, spend a few moments of quiet at the end of this talk, asking God to communicate something of His word to you this week in a way that you can understand it. So the book of Ruth, this simple story of love, devotion, honor, has such an impact on that small community that it was destined to resonate down through the generations, told and retold, until it became a part of the holy book that we can hold in our hands today. And I do love a happy ending, don't you?